My husband threw my things in garbage bags and changed the locks on the day I buried my mother. He forgot one thing. He never actually owned anything. Not the house, not the cars, not the guards who just blacklisted his name. My mother's casket hadn't even cleared the cemetery gates when my phone buzzed. I remember the exact sound, that specific vibration, 2 short pulses, then a long one, his custom alert tone. The one I'd set 2 years ago because I thought it was sweet to know when he was calling. I had his name saved as a little red heart. Isn't that funny? I was still holding a single white lily, still standing close enough to the grave that the turned earth smelled damp against my heels. The pastor was still speaking. My Aunt Cecile was crying so hard she'd fogged her glasses entirely, and my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. I almost let it go to voicemail, the way you do when you're trying to stay present in a moment that's breaking you apart. I looked. I've changed the locks. You took too long to grieve. Pack your things from the porch. I'll have someone send the rest. I read it 3 times. The pastor's voice continued somewhere above me. She was a woman of extraordinary grace, and I stood there reading 12 words on a screen while my mother lay 4 feet below me in white silk. I didn't cry. I want you to understand that. Not because I was numb, not because I was in denial. Something colder than grief moved in and took up all the available space. My hands stopped shaking, my jaw unclenched. I blinked, and every tear I had left dried before it could fall. I put the lily on top of the casket. I kissed the wood once. I turned around, walked to my car, and I drove home. And that's when everything started. To understand what happened that day, you have to understand what I came from, and more importantly, what David never bothered to learn about it. My name is Sarah Calloway Marsh. I'm 37 years old. I have a master's in finance from Georgetown and a law degree I never practiced, because by the time I passed the bar, my father had already asked me to come home and help him restructure his company's legal holdings. I did. I was good at it. I spent 5 years rebuilding the trust architecture that protected every asset my family had accumulated over 3 generations. My father, Colonel Richard Calloway, built his money the long way. He started with military service, 2 tours, Fallujah, 04 and 07, and came home with nothing but a good name, a bad knee, and an absolute iron certainty that the only things worth protecting were the people and property you'd actually bled for. He took that certainty and turned it into Apex Security Group, a private security firm that now guards 47 gated communities across Southern California, contracts with 3 city governments, and employs over 200 people, including several men who served beside him overseas. He built it. My mother managed the books. I restructured the holdings. When my parents' health started to decline, first my father's heart, then my mother's lungs, I came home for good. I moved into the Bel Air estate. I managed everything. I became sole executor of the Calloway Family Trust when my father stepped down at 68. I also made the mistake of falling in love. David Marsh was a commercial real estate developer, handsome in the way that expensive things are handsome, polished, curated, precisely maintained. He wore his confidence the way other men wore cologne. You smelled it before you saw him. He was funny at parties. He was charming at dinners. He was warm at exactly the moments warmth was most likely to be noticed. We met at a charity gala in 2019. He knew who my family was. He asked thoughtful questions about my father's company and my mother's philanthropic work. He looked genuinely interested. I now understand that David was always doing research. We dated for 14 months. He proposed on a Sunday morning in Montecito, on the terrace of a hotel I'd always wanted to visit, with a ring that was, I later learned, purchased on a line of credit he was already struggling to service. I said yes. My mother cried. My father shook his hand and said quietly, in the way my father says everything quietly, "Take care of her, son. You only get one chance at that." We signed a prenuptial agreement 3 weeks before the wedding. My attorney, Rebecca Liang, JD, Harvard, 22 years in matrimonial law, drafted it. It was 16 pages. It was specific to the point of being poetic. Every asset held under the Calloway Family Trust was enumerated, protected, and unreachable. The estate in Bel Air, the 4 vehicles, the security firm, the investment accounts. David signed it. He did not read it. I know he didn't read it because of what happened 18 months later, but I also know because Rebecca told me afterward that he'd spent exactly 4 minutes with the document before signing. 4 minutes for 16 pages. My attorney clocked it. We moved into the estate together. My name was on everything. His name was on the marriage certificate and the joint checking account we opened together, a small operational account, never more than $40,000 in it at any given time, used for household expenses and travel. It never occurred to me that he was calculating something. It should have. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. They always are, aren't they? You just build little explanations for each one and stack them in a corner until the pile becomes a wall you can't see over anymore. Flag 1. 8 months into the marriage, David started asking detailed questions about the trust. Not curious questions, methodical ones. How many assets fell under it? Whether I could sell anything without board approval. Whether the house could be transferred to a joint holding. I told him it couldn't. He nodded and dropped it. I told myself he was just getting curious about finances. He was, after all, a real estate developer. Of course, he thought about ownership structures. Flag 2. 14 months in, he started pushing for a joint investment account. Something we both controlled. Something with his name fully on it. I said I'd think about it. Rebecca advised against it strongly. I stalled. He backed off, but not in the easy, natural way of a man who's dropped an idea. In the taut, quiet way of a man who's decided to wait. Flag 3. Around the time my mother's health got serious, around Around the time I was driving to Cedars-Sinai twice a week, sitting through oncology consultations, managing her medications, managing the trust, managing everything, David started staying out late. Business dinners, he said. Client development. I was too exhausted to investigate. I am not proud of that. Flag 4. 2 months before the funeral, I found a receipt. Not for anything dramatic, just a hotel in Santa Monica. One night, one room. Nothing on his calendar for that date. I confronted him gently. He said it was a client meeting that ran long. He hadn't wanted to wake me driving home at 2 a.m. He'd been trying to be considerate. I believed him. Or I told myself I believed him. There's a difference. Flag 5. 3 weeks before my mother died, my father's head of security, Marcus Vargas, 21 years with Apex, 6'4", ex-military, a man who once walked through mortar fire to get my father to a medical evac, told me quietly that he'd noticed someone had attempted to pull estate ownership records from the county assessor's office, twice, under a name he didn't recognize. I asked him to look into it. He did. I won't tell you yet what he found. You'll understand why in a moment. My mother died on a Tuesday morning in March at 6:14 a.m. I was holding her hand. Her name was Margaret Ann Calloway. She was 64 years old. She had read me every word of Charlotte's Web when I was 5 and cried at the end both times. She made her own pasta. She kept every letter I'd ever written her. She had a garden she tended every morning before anyone else was awake, and she used to say that plants were the only things that got better the more you paid attention to them. I have never known a grief like losing her. I took 38 days. 38 days of making arrangements, accepting condolences, organizing her belongings, managing the estate transition that her death triggered. 38 days of calling my father, who is himself not well, and talking him through the loss of his partner of 41 years. 38 days of not sleeping correctly, of eating wrong, of sitting in her garden at 5 a.m., because that was where she had been most herself. David barely participated. He came to the hospital twice during her final week. He stood at the back during the wake like a guest who'd arrived at the wrong party. He patted my shoulder at the graveside service the way you pat a coworker on the shoulder when their project didn't go well. He did not hold my hand once. Not once in 38 days did he hold my hand. I noticed. I filed it. I kept moving because that is what you do when you're the one holding everything up. And then the casket hadn't even cleared the gates, and his name lit up my screen. The drive from Forest Lawn to the Bel Air estate takes exactly 31 minutes in light traffic. I made it in 28. I didn't call David. I didn't call Rebecca. I didn't call anyone. I drove with the windows down and the radio off, and I thought very clearly, the way you think when something in you has gone surgical, about every conversation I'd ever had with Marcus Vargas. Marcus had called me 9 days earlier. I'd been in the middle of my mother's paperwork. The medical billing alone was a document management project when his name appeared on my phone. He had a habit of texting before calling. He didn't text first. "Sarah," he said, "I need you to listen carefully." He told me what he'd found. The name on the county assessor inquiries was a shell company, a Delaware LLC with no website and a 2-year history. Its registered agent had also registered 4 other entities, all within 18 months of each other. One of those entities had a named officer, David A. Marsh. Marcus had also found, through channels I am deliberately not going to specify, because I know my father's people, and I know the line between legal investigation and something else, that David had been in contact with a civil litigation attorney, not a divorce attorney, a litigation attorney who specialized in something very specific, contested trust beneficiary claims. David was planning to challenge the trust. He believed, and because he had never read anything, never done the actual work, just assumed, that marriage to me created a pathway into the Calloway holdings, that a contested claim, filed at the right moment, perhaps while I was emotionally vulnerable, perhaps while my father was ill, perhaps immediately following the death of a key trustee, my mother, could create enough legal turbulence to extract something. He was wrong. On every legal level, he was wrong. Rebecca could have told him in 15 seconds that he was wrong. He never asked Rebecca. He asked the litigation attorney, who apparently also didn't fully read the trust documents before taking the meeting. Or perhaps David simply didn't show them all of it. I'm getting ahead of myself. What mattered, driving those 28 minutes, was that I had known for 9 days what David was planning. Marcus had been monitoring. Rebecca had been briefed. And now David had moved. He'd just moved too early. I picked up my phone at a red light. I dialed a number. Not 911, not David, not Rebecca. A number I'd memorized years ago. Encrypted line. Apex Command. It rang once. Apex Command. Director Sarah. A pause. "We are so sorry for your loss. What are your orders?" "Execute protocol eviction," I said. "Full asset lockdown. I'm 8 minutes out." "Confirmed. Teams are in position." I put the phone down. I drove the last 8 minutes in complete silence. The iron gates of the estate opened as my car approached. Facial recognition on the exterior cameras, coded to me specifically. Not to David. Never to David. He had a key card for the pedestrian entrance, but the main gate had always required biometric confirmation from a trust-authorized resident. He had never noticed that. I came through the gates and stopped. There was a car in my driveway. I'd never seen it before, but I understood it instantly. Neon pink Mercedes G-Wagon, custom wrap, the kind of vehicle that announces itself as a personality. It was parked dead center in the circular driveway, angled slightly, the way people park when they want their car to be seen. Against my front door, 6 black garbage bags, 6 hefty bags stuffed with my belongings, my clothes, folded quickly and then unfolded by the shoving, a corner corner of my grandmother's shawl, blue cashmere, visible through a gap in one tied top, and there, wedged between two bags and not even properly sealed, my grandmother's jewelry box, mahogany, brass hinges. My mother's mother had brought it from Oahu in 1962, stuffed in a garbage bag. I sat in my car for exactly 11 seconds. Then I looked up at the bedroom window. David was there. A woman I didn't recognize, tall, young, hair in expensive extensions, was there beside him. They were holding champagne glasses. They were looking down at the driveway. They were toasting. On the day I buried my mother, they were toasting. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a matte black keycard. No logo, no text, just a microchip and 12 digits embossed on the back. The master override for the Callaway Estates smart home system. Every electronic lock, every automated system, every security protocol in the building ran through a single encrypted hub. That hub was mine. I tapped the card twice. The smart home cut off first. Music? I could hear it even from the driveway. Some bass-heavy thing he had no business playing today of all days went silent. Air conditioning? Killed. Every motorized blind in the house snapped open simultaneously, flooding every room with blinding late-afternoon Southern California sun. I watched the bedroom window. I could see David frown, tap his phone, lift it, put it down. He thought it was a Wi-Fi outage. I almost laughed. Then every screen in the house, televisions, the kitchen display, the office monitors, the smart mirrors in the bathrooms, flashed simultaneously to a single red screen. Access denied. Unauthorized occupant detected. Perimeter lockdown in 3, 2, 1. The front doors came open from the outside. 4 men in full tactical gear, Apex security ID on their vests, moved through the entrance in single formation. Marcus Vargas was not among them. He was with me. He had pulled up 30 seconds after I did, in the black Apex SUV, and was now standing at my passenger window with the calm expression of a man who has done significantly more difficult things than this. I got out of my car. I straightened my dress, black, the one I'd worn to bury my mother 4 hours ago, and I stood at the bottom of the front steps. Then we all heard it. David, at full volume, coming down the glass staircase. He came flying down in his silk robe, champagne flute still in hand, bare feet slapping the marble steps, face already red and climbing toward purple. What is this? Who are these people? He hit the ground floor and spun toward the nearest tactical officer. I am the homeowner. Get out. I will have you all arrested. Do you understand me? Get out of my house. Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Marsh. His voice was the same voice he'd used in Fallujah, I imagine. Even, patient, load-bearing. You are an unauthorized occupant of a privately held trust property. You are being asked to vacate the premises immediately. I live here. I am married to the woman who— Where is Sarah? Where— Sarah? He looked past Marcus, past the officers, and found me at the bottom of the steps. His expression shifted. He thought I'd intervene on his behalf. I watched him think it. I watched him relax, just slightly, just enough to believe he still had a card to play. That was when he heard the tow truck. The hydraulic chains were already wrapped around the G-Wagon's rear axles. The driver, a compact man named Hector who had done exactly this job for Apex for 11 years, ran the controls without ceremony. The pink SUV rose off my pavers like a toy being lifted from a playroom floor. David came through the front doors like he'd been launched. That's not— You can't! Stop that truck! Stop that truck right now! He ran to the edge of the steps, stopped, looked at the truck, looked at me. I let him finish. That's the thing nobody tells you about power. Real, structural, documented power. Not the shouted kind. It's patient. It can wait. It doesn't need to compete with volume. I stepped forward. David, I said quietly. Quietly enough that he had to stop shouting to hear me. You never read the prenup. He blinked. Sarah, I don't know what's happening here, but this is— I was just— The trust owns this house. I kept my voice level. The trust owns those cars. The trust owns every blade of grass on this property, and the pavement you're standing on in your bare feet. My family's trust. Not yours. Not ours. Mine. We bought this together. I contributed to this. You deposited $3,200 into a joint checking account for 22 months, I said. That's $70,400 toward a $12.8 million estate. Rebecca ran the numbers. It's in the filing. He went still. What filing? From behind me, Marcus stepped forward and handed me a manila envelope. I opened it without looking away from David. Rebecca Liang filed for legal separation this morning at 9:47 a.m., I said, while you were packing my grandmother's jewelry into a hefty bag. Exhibit A is the trust document. Exhibit B is the prenuptial agreement with your signature. Exhibit C is the joint account history. I paused. Exhibit D is the attorney you contacted about challenging the trust. The meeting notes, the strategy documents, the Delaware LLC you used to pull county assessor records on my property. His face had stopped being red. It had become something else entirely. White. Still. Like a man who's just realized he's been standing on ice that was never as thick as he thought. Behind him, the girlfriend appeared in the doorway. She looked at the tow truck. She looked at David. She looked at the tactical team. She pulled out her phone and quietly opened an app. Smart girl. She was calling an Uber before David finished processing what was happening. I almost liked her for that. David went for his phone. I watched him open the banking app, the joint account, the last thing with his name on it, the one card he still thought he held. His fingers moved fast, too fast, shaking. I watched his face. I've replicated that moment in my memory many times since. I want to describe it accurately because it was important. There is a specific expression a person makes when they realize that the plan they've been running, the architecture structure of manipulation they've been quietly constructing, the future they've been quietly stealing, has just collapsed entirely. It is not anger, it is not grief, it is a kind of internal stillness that looks like a system shutting down. His phone lowered, his eyes came back to mine. Pending investigation, he said, not a question, just repeating what the screen had told him. Marital fraud and misappropriation of trust assets, I confirmed. Rebecca filed the freeze this morning as well. Detective Carol Amato, 12 years in white-collar financial crimes, Beverly Hills Division, is handling the investigation. She has all 4 years of transaction records. The champagne glass was still in his hand. I don't think he'd realize that. I checked my watch. You have 5 minutes, David. He didn't move immediately. He stood there in his silk robe on my pavers, his bare feet on the driveway my father had built, with no money, no house, no allies, and a litigation strategy that had already been dissected and documented. The files, he said. His voice had dropped to something very small. The safe in my office. Marcus found them 10 days ago, I said simply. 2 years of documents, financial records, correspondence with the litigation attorney, a business plan, annotated in David's handwriting, titled Callaway Asset Transfer, Phase 2, notes on my father's health, notes on my mother's prognosis, notes on the timing of the trust executor transition. He had been planning this for 2 years. He had been planning it while I sat beside my mother's hospital bed. I have a rule about letting emotion drive decisions. My father taught it to me. He said, the man who leads with his feelings leads from behind, so I applied the rule. I let Rebecca and Detective Amato handle the documentation. I let Vargas handle the security protocols. I stayed in my lane, but standing there in my funeral dress, 4 hours after burying my mother, looking at the man who had married me for access to something he never understood, I let myself feel it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I put it down. Clock is ticking, I said. He left. Not gracefully. David didn't have graceful in him, not really. That had always been performance, but he left. He went back inside for 4 minutes, came out with a duffel bag, didn't look at me again. The girlfriend's Uber arrived while he was still gathering things. She got in. She didn't say a word to him. Honestly, I respected that efficiency. He called a car from the street. I watched through the security feed from the interior of the house, where I'd gone to retrieve my grandmother's jewelry box. I cleaned the hefty bag residue off the mahogany with the hem of my sleeve. I put the box back in its place on the mantel in the study, under the portrait of my mother at 30. I sat in my father's chair. I called my father. He answered on the second ring, the way he always does. Always the second ring, never the first, never the third. A habit from the military that he'd never explained. Marcus told me, he said. I know. A long pause. You all right, sweetheart? Getting there, I said. Eventually, another pause. Your mother would have had something cutting to say about all of this. I laughed. It was small and genuine, and it hurt. She really would have. We stayed on the phone for a long time without saying much else. 3 months later, Rebecca finalized the legal separation. The prenup held at every challenge. David's litigation attorney withdrew from representation after reviewing the full trust documentation. There was, in the end, nothing to litigate. Not one viable claim. Detective Carol Amato's investigation into the Delaware LLC and the attempted trust challenge scheme was ongoing as of the time I'm writing this. 2 of David's associates, the ones who'd pulled the county assessor records, agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for reduced exposure. The litigation attorney was referred to the California State Bar for disciplinary review. David currently rents a studio apartment in Reseda. The pink G-Wagon was impounded. I'm told it sat in an Apex lot for 6 weeks before his girlfriend finally arranged to retrieve it. By then, the storage fees exceeded the value of the custom wrap. The joint checking account was unfrozen and closed. Rebecca arranged for the balance to be donated, in my mother's name, to the UCLA Thoracic Oncology Center. My father came to stay at the estate for 3 weeks in June. He tended my mother's garden every morning before anyone else was awake. He didn't say much about it. He didn't need to. I started sleeping again in October. The jewelry box is still on the mantle. There's something I've thought about a lot in the months since. David was so certain he understood the situation, certain enough to act, certain enough to change the locks on my house, my mother's house, my grandfather's house, on the day I buried her, certain enough to toast in my bedroom window while I stood at a graveside. He had looked at everything we built and seen a structure he could exploit. He had looked at my grief and seen a vulnerability he could time. What he had never done was understand it. He didn't understand that my father had built Apex Security because he believed protection was sacred. He didn't understand that every document in the Callaway Trust had been written with exactly this kind of scenario in mind, not because we expected betrayal, but because we understood the world clearly enough to prepare for it. He didn't understand that Marcus Vargas, who had served beside my father under live fire, was not an employee. He was family, and he didn't understand me. He'd looked at me for 4 years and seen a grieving daughter, a good wife, a woman distracted by care and love and obligation. He'd seen softness where there was actually architecture. My mother used to say, "The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing to prove." I have nothing to prove. I never did.